This video is about the classical elements and their correspondences for use in the practice of magic. So if you practice magic or you're interested in any sort of magic, manifestation, healing, method, etc., this video is for you because I explain what the classical elements are, what forces they represent, and I give you some indications on how you can use the classical elements to enhance your magic practice. We need to start by first defining what are the classical elements. There's a lot of confusion out there. Originally, they were defined by Plato, and Plato thought that the classical elements were actually physical structures. And specifically, one part of his theory that survived was the idea that the classical elements were composed of triangles, if you were to break them down. All right, well, Plato had his view that the classical elements were like physical, like chemicals. And that's very similar to modern day thinking. When we think about an element, we actually think of like a physical chemical structure. But Aristotle, the individual who came after Plato, he had a different view about the elements. And what he thought was that they were forces in nature, not physical elements. Yes, there were like physical structures or occurrences that represented the elements, but that the elements themselves were actually forces, and that these forces would embody themselves in nature, and these forces were what created reality. Now, the cool thing is that as a mage, and I use this term because it's number one, gender neutral. It's not masculine or feminine. And mage means anyone who practices magic. So it could be you're a healer, you're actually like a wizard or a witch. You can do any kind of magic. You could be even doing prayer. Like you could be very religious and devout and praying for change. That's a form of magic too. And this term mage covers that. So just a little quick technical note. Anyway, so you as the mage, you can do magic using the classical elements, and you can channel the forces of the classical elements as defined by Aristotle. You can channel these forces to shift reality and cause changes to reality that are paranormal, which we would define as magic. Now, the next term that we need to define is called correspondence. A lot of you are familiar with this, but I just want to briefly go over it. Basically, the idea of correspondence is that the power of one thing is represented by another thing, so that multiple things in nature embody the same force or power. And as the mage, you can channel that force or power to cause shifts to reality. And the reason why this is important is that sometimes force cannot be accessed directly. It's either very elusive or it's beyond the ability to channel it or to control it or to harness it. But if you know the correspondence may be more accessible to you, and you can use the correspondence to get that same power or force, and then you can use it for your magic practice. And I'm going to give you a very practical example of this next. Here is the example with candle magic. So I'm going to show you in this video. The candle corresponds to the classical element of fire, and fire represents the force of existence. Now, obviously, the force of existence is extremely powerful and somewhat abstract because everything in the universe came into being because of this force. Even the universe, the whole galaxy, the universe, the whole thing, the Big Bang, came forth from a single explosion. So it's the force of existence created the whole thing. So obviously, it's too hard to channel that directly. But you can use a correspondence like a candle, which you can easily access and use, And then you can channel that same basic force of existence to bring things to life. Specifically, if you do quote unquote candle magic, or if you pray with a candle present, you are energizing your magic or your prayer with the force of existence. And the force of existence is what brings things into the physical world. It's what creates reality. And that's why prayer and candle magic can work, because it's channeling this force of existence to make your desires, as Austin Spare would say, or your wishes or your spells or your prayers come true. The next thing to understand is, how were these classical elements derived? Because I talked about Plato in the beginning, I talked about Aristotle. These symbols were invented by alchemists in the Middle Ages. So we need to sort of untangle all this, because, and this is very important, because the derivation of the classical elements is the key to understanding the correspondence that they embody. That is, it's the key to understanding what force in nature each classical element represents. And once you identify the force, you can use that force to cause magical shifts and changes to reality. Now, I have a course where I teach people how to do this with a pendulum, and they get amazing results using these classical elements. A lot of you are probably doing it already and not fully conscious of it, or you may be partly aware of what's going on, but this will help you to really get some clarity, because the forces that they correspond to, you have to have a precise correspondence. If you say that something corresponds to something else, but it doesn't actually correspond to that, it won't work. You have to find the true correspondence. And that's why in the past, magicians would write really big books filled with correspondences, because they were trying to figure out what's the key here to the magic power. Like, how do you access the magic power from nature? So I'm going to show you a pretty novel take on this that I've never seen anyone else present. It's totally new, and it can help you a lot. And I already have people using it, and they're getting great results. So we have to go back to Plato first. And the basic idea was that Plato said that all of the classical elements were composed of triangles. Alchemists in the Middle Ages were aware of Plato. They're also aware of Aristotle. And so therefore, at some point in history, and it's not clear when, they started using the triangular symbols. So that is step number one. They used the triangular symbols for the classical elements based on Plato's idea that the classical elements were made of triangles. But they did not accept Plato's idea of the Platonic solids, the alchemists, that is. Instead, they took Aristotle's point of view, Plato's student Aristotle. They took his point of view that they represented forces in nature, because the alchemists were extremely interested in channeling forces from nature to cause changes to reality to occur. And this has been stereotyped as the search for gold, which is like mostly BS. But they did have magic power, these alchemists, and they could do a lot of really cool things with the power that they had. All right, so that's where the symbols come from. It's a combination of Plato and Aristotle. Plato's idea of the triangles, Aristotle's idea of the forces. Now, in order to fully understand this, you need to add in another piece that's often missing from the discussion. And it's the famous document or writing called the Emerald Tablet. Now, this is not the modern day New Age Emerald Tablet of Thoth thing. What I'm talking about is the Emerald Tablet that is a central text of the Hermetic works that's been around since like very long time ago, and it's been translated over and over again by different people. The translation I used was by Isaac Newton, one of the most famous alchemists who ever lived, surprisingly. Anyway, this was Hermes Trismegistus, supposedly, but this was the Hermetic period, the Renaissance, that this became popular, this Emerald Tablet, and it became a central text of alchemy. It was considered to be the secret for creating the Philosopher's Stone. And what they talk about in the Emerald Tablet is called the operation of the sun. And it sounds very abstract. Like, what does that mean? Well, operation is a series of steps. And the sun every day goes through a series of stages or an operation. Basically, I'll use the pen here to help color this in while I'm talking. The sun rises in the morning, and it's almost like it's being conceived, because when it first starts to rise, it's not fully formed yet. Just like a baby in the womb, when it's first conceived, it has to develop slowly over time. And the womb is feminine. It's like the night. The baby comes from the womb. The sun comes from the night. Anyway, so at 12 noon, however, the sun is fully formed. It is released from the grips of the night, because now it's at its highest point and it doesn't cast shadows because it's directly overhead. So at this point, this is like a baby being born. It's now free from the mother. And it can now grow and have an influence on the world as an independent thing that exists independently of the night. So the sun is born and then it begins to exist. And during the afternoon, the sun starts to have its maximal effect on the earth. Specifically at 3 o'clock in the afternoon is when the sun is at its most powerful. And then the sun begins to set. And as it sets, this is like the process of dying. So like a person gets older and then gradually they begin to die if, everything goes to plan. Well, the sun does the same thing. It starts to set and then it goes through this process of ending, which is like a death. And then at 12 midnight, the sun is completely dead. It's gone. It's gone from the world. You might see reflections of it off of the moon, but that's it. It's pretty much gone. And those reflections are almost like a ghost or something. And it's just like with people, when people die, sometimes you can see some traces of their spirit or their soul. But also, like with people who are dead, the soul is eternal. The Atman, the spirit, the consciousness, that survives the death of the body. And the sun survives its death each day. And then it rises the next day in the morning. And this is why the night is the time of spirits, specifically the time from 12 midnight until 4 in the morning. Those are the witching hours, because the sun is gone and it represents the spirit realm this period of time. All right, now to bring this back to the Emerald Tablet and the operation of the sun, what are they talking about? Well, I'm going to show you a quote that illustrates this, but basically each one of these stages represents something. Represents a process of creation, a process of existence, a process of ending, and a process of post-existence or the afterlife. It's kind of the opposite of life. So these are the stages, and alchemists realize that these stages are forces in nature that exist. And if you can tap into these forces, just like the sun can create a new day every year, and just like all the days create the year itself, it creates time. If you could harness those forces, you would have the forces of creation under your control. You would have the power to create and destroy, which is what the alchemists did in their magic processes. And we can channel these forces too if we are aware of them. Triangles are important. So check this out. When the sun rises, and I'll get my pen again to kind of color this in. So the sun rises here, and then it gets to 12 noon. That is one, that can be connected. So it's like one line of a triangle. Then from 12 noon until sunset, that is another line of the triangle, and then the horizon is the bottom. So when you look at the classical elements, 2 of them are pointed up, air and fire, and then 2 of them are pointed down, earth and water. So obviously, fire has to be during the daytime. You can't have fire. Fire doesn't make sense at night. And it's pointed up. And this imaginary triangle is created by the passage of the sun is pointed up. So what is this showing us here? It's showing us that these 2 elements, air and fire, are the daytime elements, and earth and water are the nighttime elements, because the imaginary triangle is going down from sunset to midnight to sunrise. Knowing that, it's very easy to determine the sequence of the elements. I'll come back to this. Some of the elements have triangles with a line and some don't. So let's just jump right into this and I'll come back. So here is the element of air, and there's a line below the point of the triangle which points up. This line is the horizon. So what they're saying is air corresponds to the morning sun, and therefore air corresponds to the process of creation. This is the element of air because it's the sun rising. All right, then we have the element of fire. The sun there's no line in the triangle, and that's because the sun is free in the sky. It's by itself, and it's pointing up. It's the daytime. So this is the force of the existence of the sun. Earth, the triangle is pointing down, but it has a line through it. This means that the sun is setting. And if you watch the sun set, particularly if you live on land, it looks like it's going into the earth. And that's why this element is called earth. And this element represents the process of ending. Next, we have water, and water here is an upside down triangle because the sun is no longer present, it's gone, so it's the opposite of the day. Night and day are opposites, so this is up triangle, this is down triangle, and there's no line in it because it's below the horizon, so the line is absent. This is when the sun is completely absent. This is water. It represents a state of post-existence, also known as the afterlife. All right, well, why is this? And here is the quote from the Emerald Tablet that explains how I figured this out. So this is a summary because alchemists were confusing and they put in a lot of extra stuff to confuse people. But here is the summary. All things have been and arose from one by mediation of the one. And when they say one, they mean this entire cycle. Because everything is created, everything exists, everything ends, and then everything goes into a state of post-existence. This is true at all levels of reality. From a rock to a tree to a person to a molecule, it's all created, and then it exists, and then it ends. So all things have been and arose from one by this cycle. And all things have their birth from this one thing. They all come from this one cycle that's reflected by the sun. So was the world created. Yeah, day and night, the seasons, the cycle of the year. This is how Earth is created. And everything on Earth is created. So it's all from this cycle. Whether you believe in evolution, whether you believe in the creation myth, whatever you believe in, it all goes through this cycle. Okay. That which I have said of the operation of the sun is accomplished and ended. So basically, the secret of alchemy is that if you can tap into this cycle, you can harness the process of creation and destruction, and it's the same process that created the world. Now, going back here, there's a cool tidbit from Eliphas Levi. Now, Eliphas Levi is much later in history. He was a very famous French occultist who greatly influenced the Golden Dawn, and he also brought back magic into the modern world. He was also a radical socialist who was way ahead of his time. He wanted equal rights for women, and he was also against slavery and things like that. Anyway, so going into this, he, in one of his papers, and I talk about this in my book, The Esoteric Sun, he says that there are two signs that are really important, the pentagram and the hexagram. Now, when Alfred Waite translated his paper, he kind of mixed them up, but I point out the mistake in my book and why it was an error. But what Levi says, basically, is that the hexagram, this structure here, it represents the microcosm. That is, it represents the expression of cosmic forces in the earthly realm. And interestingly enough, if you take the classical elements and you combine them all together, you get the hexagram. So this is in alignment with occult principles that evolved later in time, this ancient alchemical idea of using the triangles as the symbols, and these triangles represent the sun, which represents a cycle of creation and destruction. And this is the expression of cosmic forces in the earthly realm. And that makes sense because, Aristotle, like I said, defined these elements based on forces that he saw in nature. They weren't just things he made up. It's like he's like, well, a piece of wood is on fire. What is the force of that? Oh, there's a bucket of water. What's the force of that? There's a rock on the ground. What's the force of the rock? Why does it exist? Oh, there's some smoke coming up from the fire. Like, why is that smoke there? What is the force creating that smoke? So while modern scientists don't accept this idea, this has been deeply established in esoteric thinking, occult thinking for millennia now, for a long time. And so I wanted to point it out because it's important. We're dealing with forces here that are cosmic in origin, but they are being expressed in the earthly realm. And that's also why we need correspondences to access these forces, because they are so beyond our realm generally. Like I said, they created the entire universe in the Big Bang, that, we have to bring it down to our level, our earthly level. And the correspondences help us to do that because the power is more effective and you can do more with it when you're at the right level of reality and using it. Okay, so here is the promised information of the application of the classical elements to the practice of magic. So how do you use these classical elements in a magic setting? How do you apply it to magic? I'm going to show you right now. We'll go through each element one by one. The first element is air. And we said that air represented the morning and it's rising. Now, I do not in this video go into the Aristotelian definitions of the classical elements because I thought it would be too boring for people. But there is a logic behind this, and if you want to understand why I correlate air with smoke, read my book, The Esoteric Sun. It's explained in a very logical and clear way that makes absolutely perfect sense, but I didn't want to bore everyone with it in this video. But basically, air is defined as hot and moist. Hot means that the substance moves by itself. Moist means it has no defined shape. So air, what is air? Well, air represents the process of creation. So if you use smoke in magic practice, it's the process of creation. And this, when the sun rises, it's cleansing. It cleanses away the previous day. It cleanses away the night. It's purification. It's a fresh new start. Each day is a fresh start. It's also the creation of something new. I said this corresponds to a baby being developed in the womb over time. So this is the energy of creation, and it's also nurturing. As the sun is rising, it's growing and developing, it's being nurtured in this process. So that's what this substance air represents. And here is how we see air in magic. Air is seen in many magic practices, both religious, indigenous, and New Age, etc., and occult. So here's the Catholic Church. What are they doing? They're using incense and smoke all the time. Same thing with traditional religions. Like if you go, like let's say to Bali and you go to a Hindu temple, you have to use incense in the temple. If you go to a shaman in Peru, they're going to use a mapacho cigarette and blow smoke on your head at the most inopportune times. And what I did. When you go to a New Age ceremony or a New Age shaman or whatever, they smudge you or they use incense on you. If you're trying to clear a house of unwanted spirits, you use smudge to help get rid of them. Why is this? Well, because air, it represents the element of air. The smoke is the element of air. It's cleansing, it's purifying, it's creating new potentials. It's also banishing the night, the time of spirits. It's also banishing the old you, the previous day. So when you go to a ceremony and you get smudged, you're clearing away all the crap from before. Same thing like when you're in the church or in the temple or in, the prayer space with the incense going. It's clearing away all the garbage so that you can create something new, a new reality based on your spiritual practice. That's why the shaman is blowing smoke on your head during the whole ayahuasca thing, to get rid of all that old stuff that's no longer needed, and also to keep away harmful spirits that might come into the space at night. That's why you use this when you're smudging a house, to clear it energetically, because it's like bringing sunlight, like the morning sun, into the house. It just gets rid of all the old nighttime stuff. So super, super important. So to incorporate this in your magic practice, realize what this energy represents: creation, and then use smoke every time you're trying to manifest or create something new, or if you're trying to cleanse away things that are old and unwanted that you don't want anymore, that you feel are residual and hanging on. It's for purification, cleansing, creating something new, and also for nurturing things. It could be nurturing your spiritual practice, nurturing a spell you created, nurturing a prayer. It's all nurturing so that these things get in the process of development, and smoke can help with that. The element of fire. This represents bringing something to life, energizing, revitalizing, and also it represents the emanation of power. And this is represented by the element of fire, which is the sun during the afternoon, and it's the sun that's totally free, and it's very easy to bring this fire energy into your magic. So when the sun is at its fullest, it's at its state of existence that's perfect. And this period of time in the afternoon corresponds to perfect health, perfect wellness, high energy, high vitality. It also represents power, magic power, physical power, potency of the physical self. So the fire element is very useful for any kind of magic or prayer or any kind of practice, spiritual practice, where you're trying to bring something to life, trying to energize something. It's also great for healing, because if you're healing, your vitality is low. You need vitalization. You need energy. It's also good if you want to just get more personal authority or more sovereignty, more personal power. You can use the fire element. So let's look at this for magic. Fire shows up in magic all over the place, and most people don't realize it. Now, obviously on the bottom there with candle magic, it's being done intentionally. The practitioners are trying to use the candle to boost the energy of their magic. But when you go to a church, like that woman above, you're doing the same thing. You're doing candle magic in the church. It's just not called candle magic because that would be sacrilegious, but it's basically the same thing. You're energizing your prayers with the power of existence, and that will help to bring it to life. Why do they have a torch in the Olympics? It's a symbol of vitality and power. The human body can only participate in an Olympic event if it's in a peak state of physical health. To run a marathon, to do any of those amazing things that those athletes do, they're all expressions of the physical body at its most potent, at its strongest levels of vitality. And that's what the Olympic torch symbolizes. It represents power, personal physical power, ideal health, the ideal of the physical body being paramount. And in ancient times, that was very important, like for the ancient Greeks and stuff. They, the body and the mind and the arts were all important. And so this is just an expression of personal physical prowess and power. So when you want to do magic to help get someone get healthy, to make your desires come true, to energize your spells, anything that you want to bring to life, energize, revitalize, give power to, incorporate the element of fire. This can be done very easily with a candle. It can be done less easily with a torch or a bonfire, but it will have the same effect. That's why a lot of pagan rituals use fire. That's why people carry torches when they're, in the old days, when they were out to get somebody or they were protesting, the torch represented their personal power and they were taking it back. And they would often do it at night because the night represents the spirit realm. And so, it's easier to break the rules than it is during the daytime. But you have the torch, you have the power to change reality by doing it through the period of the afterlife. Anyway, that's a digression. All right, there's something else that's really cool about this. And it's that this triangle with the dot in the middle represents power, I said, and also the force of existence. And this is where the Illuminati eye comes from. Yeah. Everyone says, oh, it's so evil. The Illuminati, they're so evil. They're killing babies and stuff. Okay, I don't know anything about that, but what I do know is that from an occult perspective, and it's on the US $1 bill, the all-seeing eye of God, the eye of providence, represents personal power, vitality, expression, authority, existence, the state of existence. So on the dollar bill, it's basically saying that there's a new world order that God blesses, and it's the United States, and where it's the all-seeing eye is blessing this pyramid of our country. The country is being represented by a pyramid. The pyramid is the triangle, it's the classical elements of Plato and Aristotle. So that's where this is coming from. And it's fire, it represents fire, the force of existence. So claiming the force of existence is powerful. So when you see one of these musicians or something doing this, they probably have no idea what they're doing. Maybe in a few exceptions, but most cases they're just doing it to shock people or to be cool or whatever. But what they're actually saying from an occult perspective is that they have power. They have personal power. And that's where this idea comes from. The earth element. The earth element represents the process of ending, because it's the ending of the day. And this element is very, very important traditionally in alchemy, because all alchemical processes started with ending. They called it the Negredo phase. They thought that first you had to end something, and then once you ended it, you can then get the energy and use it to create something new. And it makes a lot of sense. You end the old, and that allows something new to emerge because you've ended what was happening previously. If you are sick and you end it, then you can have health. If you're poor and you end it, then you can create wealth because you've ended the cycle of poverty. So almost every magic practice you do benefits from this process of ending. And I strongly encourage you to bring the element of earth into your magic practice. And it's extremely easy to do because any physical object embodies the element of earth. So from a magic, like a classical magic perspective, sort of Wicca perspective or whatever, the staff, the chalice, the pentacle, the cross, the sword, the athame, and the magic wand, these all represent the element of earth. And I explain why in my book, The Esoteric Sun, but briefly, earth is cold, meaning the molecules are moving slowly. So if you leave the substance by itself, it won't really do anything. Like if I put this pen on the table, it's just going to sit there unless I do something to it. It's just going to sit there, right? That's what they mean by cold. It's unlike fire and smoke, because like fire and smoke would just constantly seem to be moving by themselves. Okay, and then it's cold, but then it's dry. It has a definite shape. So the pen has a definite shape, the sword has a definite shape, the chalice has a definite shape. So that's why these represent the earth element. Now there's a lot of confusion in like New Age thinking or Wiccan thinking or magic thinking. People say, oh, the chalice represents water. Absolutely not. It represents the earth. The water or the alcohol or whatever you put in it represents water, but the chalice itself is cold and dry. So the actual correspondence in magic is with earth or ending. And this is very, very important because, as I said in the beginning, if you have the wrong correspondence, you will not get the magic power that you think you're getting. And the reason why a chalice filled with liquid is very powerful is because it represents the process of ending, the earth, and then the liquid you put in represents the afterlife, which is the next stage. And the next stage is where the process of manifestation, that is taking things from the ethers, from the afterlife, and then planting the seeds of intention so they can become to the earth to form. So when you have a chalice filled with liquid, it's very potent magically, but it's important to understand that the chalice without liquid in it represents earth or ending. When you put the liquid in, then you're combining the two stages, ending and post-existence. That allows you to end what was going on previously so you can manifest something new. As I said, these magic tools, the earth element shows up all over the place in magic, also in religion. Aleister Crowley on the top, picture when he was young. He's got a chalice, he's got a magic sword, he has got a cross, he's got a magic wand, he's got some other accoutrements up there. These all represent the element of earth or the process of ending. And as I said before, ending is very important because, number one, certain magic practices want you to end something. Like, you're trying to get someone you don't want out of your life. You use that process of ending to, quote unquote, banish them or make them go away. Or, in the process of healing, there's a state of dis-ease or lack of health. You want it to end so that someone can get healthy again. Your life sucks, so you want that to end, so you do prayer or magic or whatever to make it better. So this process of ending is extremely important because what it does, if you end something, it creates a gap in space and time where your new intentions can then be planted and then they can manifest later in the cycle. And that's what the Emerald Tablet was all about. And that's why alchemists always started with Negredo. Okay, the priest doing an exorcism. Of course, he's carrying the cross. The cross represents the sun. It's that same symbol of morning, noon, evening, and then midnight. So it's the solar cycle. And then it's the element of earth. And same with the Bible. It's the element of earth. It's the element of ending. And you want the demonic possession to end. You want the person to become healthy and whole again. So you take the process of ending and you stick it in the face of the person so that that problem will end. That's why they do that. All right, now, other easy ways you can bring this in is if you have crystals, you can do crystal healing or carry crystals or bring crystals with you. That's the process of ending. If you use pendulums like I do, the pendulum represents the earth element. That's the process of ending. If you use a magic wand or any kind of object, it's a physical object, that represents the process of ending. And you can bring that into your magic practice, your religious practice, your healing practice, etc. And that will cause shifts and changes to occur by stimulating ending of what you don't want to have happen, so that something new can happen. From 12 midnight here until around 4 in the morning when the twilight occurs, this is the peak time of spiritual activity. So this is represented by the water element because it represents a state of post-existence. Everything from the divine realm that manifests on the earth comes through the state of post-existence first. And I talk about that in my book, The Esoteric Sun. When you look at the Sephirot of the Tree of Life, of the Kabbalah, and other things, you see very clearly that this is where everything comes from, this state of post-existence. Also, when people die and they reincarnate, if you studied the work of Ian Stevenson and Tucker, there's always this state of post-existence that occurs before the reincarnation happens. All right, so very, very important for magic, spirituality, religion, very, very important. So where does this show up? Water element shows up in many, many practices around the world. So we have a baby being baptized there. And then sometimes they baptize people by dunking them underwater or in a river or something or in a pond. Why do they do that? Well, when you put someone under holy water or you dunk them under the water, you are returning them to the spirit realm. So that when you pull them out of the water again, they can reincarnate as a new person who is now ready to be spiritually pure. Because you put them back into the state of post-existence and then brought them back out again. That's why they do this. It's for putting you back in the spirit realm so you could be reborn or reincarnated as a pure being. All right. Same thing with like going in the Ganges River. Why do people do that? It's the same exact idea. It's a holy river. Why? Because water represents post-existence. It is the most spiritual element available to us. This is also why there are healing waters around the world that people go and use, because water represents the spirit realm. So if you pray and incorporate water with your prayer or liquids, it's extremely potent. And holy water is present in churches. If you go around the world, there are healing fountains. Many different cultures, the priests, the shamans, etc., use water in their practices or other liquids. So, for example, there's a bottle there shown, Agua de Florida. A lot of shamans use that during their ceremonies, and they throw it on people. Holy water is often thrown on people. When I was in Bali in the traditional temples, the high priest would throw holy water on everybody. They're doing this to bring you back, to connect you with the spirit realm, and to cleanse you of stuff from the earthly realm so that you can be purified and brought back. Yeah, that's why they use water in sacrament. The wine, the blood of Christ, supposedly, well, that's to connect you to the spirit realm. Christ was resurrected. Christ represents the Son. That's a side note, but it's the same idea. You drink his blood so that you can be resurrected. Okay. So same idea. Really easy to incorporate this in your magic practice. If you have holy water from Lourdes or some other place, or the Ganges or somewhere in a bottle, you can use that. I teach people how to use a pendulum to create your own holy water. You can get liquids like Agua de Florida really easily. You might be able to get some holy water from your local church, especially if you're Catholic. Just ask for it, obviously. Don't steal it. But anyway, very easy to get, and you can incorporate this into your ritual practice whenever you want to invoke the spirit realm, whenever you want to do cleansing or renewal. Now, something else I didn't fully touch on here, but I'm going to just mention it right now, is that another thing about this period of post-existence is that it's a really great time to manifest new things. So things have ended. So you can therefore plant seeds of intention during this time that can then later develop over time and come true. So it's a really great time for manifestation magic. Any kind of healing magic, manifestation magic, prayer magic, any kind of thing you want to change or influence, you can do this. Now, if you can't do it at night, the ceremony or the spell or whatever, incorporate water into the ritual or into the prayer or into the spell work, or some kind of alcohol, and then that can serve as a proxy, as a correspondence that can help to make what you want to have happen more likely to occur. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please hit the like button and the subscribe button. I also love comments, so if you made it this far and you thought this was interesting, please write a comment or a question in the discussions on YouTube here. Also, if you want more of this, this is all in my book, The Esoteric Sun. I explain in much more detail all of this information that I just shared with you and a lot more. So it's a real great book to help you learn the practice of magic, to understand the true meaning of alchemy, to get to the root of where religious symbols come from and why we do various religious practices. All of this stuff is clearly illustrated in the book and illuminated in a very simple but intellectual way. So I hope you enjoyed it and you got a lot out of this. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.